Just like in 2007 on the Wabu Cycle Tour trip, there was a commentary. The 2000 Cycle 2010 bike trip has a commentary of its own. The trip started June 14th, 2010, and finished on August 18th, 2010. And this is the story behind all the pictures and just the information you can't just grab out of seeing a slideshow. It'll be the stories and the things that come to mind that I see about a month after finishing the trip. Being 3 years older, the build up to this trip was extremely different than the last one. I remember in 2007, all year just sitting in class thinking about how much I can't wait to go on this bike trip, and just kind of having no idea what it was going to be like, how far my imagination went with it, and just kind of how the excitement and the intensity the trip had in 2007. And I don't know if it was just being busy or just feeling more comfortable about the trip itself. But in 2010, I remember laying in bed the night before we set off to drive to Maryland, and laying in bed just being like, what have I gotten into? Like, how is it the day before? I felt like I built up for it so much in 2007, and when the day arrived, I was full force, went into it with so much excitement, and I was just as excited. I just could not believe that in the morning I would be driving up to Maryland to start a trip. So we drove up all together and went to see the same places, the same beach, the same hotel, which was an amazing experience for me, and I think for the whole family. I think it was really cool that everyone was able to see this place for a second time that meant so much, but was a place that you never thought you would see before. So before we knew it, we were standing outside in the parking lot with our bikes set up, doing last-minute checkups, and biking down to the beach. As I walked my bike out of the water and picked it up, put it on the road, and began the first road, the first mile, first state, I remember just biking away, leading a couple group of guys behind me. We waved to our family, said goodbye, and I just remember starting to bike and just knowing what was about to happen, but not feeling like the intensity of that was going through me. And I feel like in a movie with all the crazy background music and all of the effects that they put into it, the intense moments are so obvious that you can feel them easier. But it just seemed like a normal day. I was with people I was friends with or about to be friends with, and although it was definitely not something you do every day, push off on a bike, but there wasn't the feeling of I'm about to be away for 10 weeks. And it's sort of difficult to force it, and it's something that you just have to go into the trip knowing that it will slowly come. So we pushed off and started biking, and began the state of Pennsylvania. We actually camped in Pennsylvania the first night, in a town called Stewartstown. And Pennsylvania it's the one state that nobody really likes. It's difficult. I remember I knew I didn't like it, but I think I definitely did some blocking out of bad memories in 2007 because it was a lot harder than I remembered. We decided to try and make our own route through Pennsylvania, a different one last time, because we thought maybe we could cut out some of the mountains and make it a little easier. But we definitely messed that one up and spent twice as much time in the mountains. But so it was a tough beginning, but it definitely made everyone a lot stronger, and just kind of got everyone ready for what's ahead, although we kind of put in our hard work early on. A very good moment for everyone. Pennsylvania really takes the life out of you, and is a shock for a lot of people. A lot of people go into the trip just hearing all the good stories, so when you're forced to bike up these mountains and you're doing something that your body's definitely not ready to do, it's sort of a shock for a lot of the guys that hey, actually biking across the country isn't just have lots of fun and eat lots of bad food. There actually is a whole lot of biking that gets involved that you're not always ready for. So once we finally reached Ohio, it was like the whole country just decided to give us a break. And they even paved the road, so that was the nicest road we rode on for the first mile and a half of Ohio. But I think this was when we first really were a group, and everyone had got to know each other. Everyone had been through the same experiences, and everyone was just thrilled to have made it through one part of the country and get our first glimpse of achievement. I think we were a couple days outside of Cleveland, and I think it was just really starting to set in for everyone what is ahead of us. We'd only been on the road for about 8 days, and we already could not remember the last time we had done anything but bike. So it's a big point in the trip, just because it's almost like you get over the hard work and you get close and you do all the bits that you don't necessarily love doing but are necessary for the trip. And this is where you start to relax, you start to feel more comfortable on the bike, and you start being able to feel like you use every single day to the fullest, and play basketball after you're done biking, and hang out and play cards, and really have a good time, just because you're not physically exhausted at the end of every day and you're still getting used to how everything works. This picture I picked just because it shows the sheer size of our group. Last time we only had 9 bikers, and you would rarely ride as a full group, but if you did, 9 bikers felt like a lot. But we rarely ever rode together on this trip as well, but the few times that we did, you just felt like an army biking down the road, and you couldn't even see the people at the front because there were so many people in between you, and it was just insane to see that we are all together, and the same sort of group feeling was had every time we went to a restaurant and ate together. We would literally take up half of an entire restaurant. They wouldn't even try to seat us all together just because no table. Would really take 15 or 16 in these small diners. So the kind of group dynamic was very different this time because there were so many people, and we were worried at first that the more people, the slower our group would be, and the more problems we would have, because if 1 in 4 people has their bike fall apart, then there's a lot more people that are going to have problems. So, but all of those expectations were just shattered by the speed of all these guys, and just how well everyone kind of managed and worked together. And instead of having like a few people that you're around all the time, you could kind of split up your time and spend. You could bike with one guy one day and then bike with another guy another day, and it just kind of kept everyone a lot more fresh, and kept the tense feelings down when you're around people all the time. But this was just the empty road, and what happens when everyone wants to hang out and you end up biking in a group. Well, this is the story of Preston, and this aspect of the trip took on a life of its own that I never really saw coming. But basically, it was about 19 or 20 days into our trip. We took a day off in a place called Henry, Illinois, and it was the day before. We stayed there on June 2nd and 3rd. It was they had a big carnival there for July 4th, and so they had a fairgrounds there. And on the last night, our second day off, we decided to walk around and hang out at the fair, and we wanted to play all the games, which wasn't great because, as you know, fair games are always way too expensive. So a bunch of guys that are trying to live on $20 a day is not very good to be at a fair. But so we were hanging out, and we saw this game where you could win a goldfish. And I remember talking to some of the guys on the trip. I was like, oh, how cool would it be if I could win a fish and bring him with me across the country. But then I realized it was actually impossible to win the games, and I would just spend $15 and then not win any goldfish. And if I did happen to win a goldfish, I would have to buy a separate tank because they come in a bag, and it was going to be bad. So I was kind of talking out loud with my friends about it, and this guy came up to me and was like, hey, I don't want this fish. Like, I want it, but I don't really want it. If you give me $2, you can have it. So we decided yes, and we bought the fish and brought him back to camp. And somehow he achieved the name Preston. And everyone bet me that he would live no longer than 3 hours, I think was the first guess. Midday tomorrow. The optimistic people gave him 5 or 6 days, but no one really had any kind of hope for him. But I bought my food and for the fish, and I was really excited about it, and I set him up on the back of my bike and just kind of decided to see how long he would make it. And a couple days passed, and he was still alive, and a couple days passed, and he was still going, and I would just feed him every morning and put him on the back of my bike and watch him shake around as we biked across the country. And he even survived some falls. A couple times my bike fell over when I wasn't around it, and I would come back from lunch and see my bike laying on its side, and Preston in half a tub of water at a 90-degree angle. But somehow the guy was a rock and was able to get through anything. So on August 18th, when I arrived at the coast, so did my man Preston, and gained huge popularity. A lot of times before we were asked how we were doing, the parents would ask, how's Preston? And then as long as he was okay, they would continue talking to you. But he really gained became a popular guy, and people were just kind of amazed that somehow this fish had made it all the way across. He was a big part of our bike trip, and he meant a lot to me, and I was just thrilled that he was able to make it over 2,500 miles from Henry, Illinois to the coast. So an exciting and funny part that was added onto the trip. This picture also kind of shows the group size and just kind of the general mentality. I think we'd bike for about an hour and a half in the morning. Just wake up, leave camp, and get on your bike. And everyone's kind of waiting for someone else to take a break. So when someone finally takes a break, then you're like, oh, thank God. So everyone will pull over and just jump off their bike and sit in the grass, and before you know it, you're face down asleep, and you've only been sitting there for 2 minutes. So it was definitely the hardest to be the person to say, hey, I think we should probably leave this break, because nobody wants to do it. But this is just kind of I think a good picture to represent what a lot of the bike trip is. So you bike around, and then you just kind of sit in a random field and just talk and hang out, and it's pretty much it. There's nothing going on. There's nothing you have to do other than get back on your bike and leave. But you get a lot of funny conversations and a lot of good times just kind of sitting in a yard eating some food and hanging out with the guys and telling different stories about stuff that's happened to you on the trip. This is a picture of Dean Rice, who lives in Minnesota, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And for the whole beginning of the trip, all you want to do is get to Minneapolis, just because it's it's kind of like a major checkpoint on the trip. You get 2 days off in a row, which is kind of heaven. You really get to take a break from biking and not just use that break as get ready for tomorrow because you'll be biking. You get to have a full day where you have nothing to do. You get to go hang out in a city. You go to a pool, and you get to sleep inside, which are all things that you really learn to not take for granted. So there was food, there was shelter, there was TV, drinks, bathrooms, everything we could have ever wanted. And it was just amazing that these people that Brian are friends with are willing to let 16 guys come into their house and just plow through all of their food and ruin the smell of their house and just kind of everything bad. So and they're extremely generous, and they brought us out everywhere, and just a really nice family that really is a big morale booster on the trip. So this is kind of where this is the end to I'd say the first half of the trip. It's a little bit less, but it's kind of like the getting ready and getting situated phase, and a lot of good times have been had already, and it's a major checkpoint for everyone, and everyone's really rested and feeling good once they leave. So a great part of the trip. One of my favorite parts, being able to hang out and be with these guys that you bike with every day in kind of like a real life city setting. So Minneapolis is the place to be. Newell, South Dakota. So about 10 days after we left Minneapolis, we biked across Minnesota and we biked across North Dakota, and we were really in the middle of the kind of plains. We got used to not really having much stuff around us, and the scenery had just completely changed. But you might be wondering what this has to do with biking and why everyone's got kind of a smirk on their face. But on July 22nd, it is Brian Burnham's birthday, which is our leader, and he's definitely quick to prank everybody else. So we had to make sure that he really felt welcome to the group, and he didn't feel like we just let him go easy because he's our leader. So he went out to breakfast one morning, and we decided to buy 8,000 square feet of saran wrap and wrap up every single item in his bag. So we took out his t-shirts, and we took out his toothbrush, and we took out his toothpaste, his cell phone charger, every little nut and bolt that he owned as a spare, every item that he owned, we individually wrapped in saran wrap and put back into his panniers. But we had left over, so we decided to saran wrap his entire bike to the table, just as a birthday gift for him when he got back, just because we hadn't got anything else for him. But he was very, I think he enjoyed it, and he at least got to unwrap something for his birthday. Although it did take him a couple weeks for every single thing to finally get unraveled. Some stuff he just kind of got tired of unwrapping, so it wasn't until something needed to be fixed in Montana that he'd pull out his toolkit and realize that also was wrapped in saran wrap. But it was a good time, and it kind of started the pranks on the bike trip, and just kind of a way for us to bond and laugh about something, and always funny to get someone back that has got you for so long. So all of these pictures are kind of pictures that I went through and thought said a lot about our trip, and I think this is a great picture, sort of explaining what happens when you send 16 guys across the country, and what they get into. So this was a pool at Faith, South Dakota, and usually we love pools, but pools don't usually love us that much. A lot of times the lifeguards will have to explain rules once or twice, and it's definitely a lot more work for them trying to keep up with us messing around in them. But for some reason this pool was just, we walked in and we asked them, hey, like, what's allowed, and they said as long as you guys are relatively safe, we'll let you do what you want, just have a good time. So suddenly, before you know it, it ended up being a line of kids behind us asking to be thrown. So we kind of got to know all the local kids and hang out with them and jump off the diving board with them, and I think that's one of my favorite parts, just going into these towns, not knowing anyone, and only being there for a half a day and being almost good friends with a lot of people. And this kid actually followed us around for the rest of the day. He goes to school and just kind of walks around town all day, and doesn't go home till really late at night. And so he followed us around all day and ate dinner with us, and played basketball and cards, and yeah, I think he was only 10 or something, but it was good, someone nice to get to know, and kind of just sort of what us hanging out with everyone is like. This is another picture of the pool. It's definitely one of our favorite things. If you get to a town, the first thing you're looking for is a pool, because there's no better feeling than getting off your bike and just hanging out in the water and taking some of that smell off. But this is Alex, one of I definitely pride myself on ability to jump off of a diving board, and it's always been one of my favorite things since a kid, doing flips and spins and all that stuff. But somehow every single bike trip, in '07 it was Chris Allen, and 2010 it was Alex Johnson. It's just always one step better than me at jumping off of things. So we would always challenge each other to doing different stuff and those kind of things. But he was a gymnast, so he always had one step above me. But another good picture of what we like to do and kind of what we get up to when we're not biking. This picture is the kind of usual shot of a group of bikers. Casey's is just a local gas station, but I actually remember this actually was one of the most terrible lunches, or if not the most terrible lunch on the entire bike trip. But the picture just kind of show what we do. I think it was about to rain that day, so we all put our bikes underneath the gas station cover, and no matter what time it was, breakfast, if it's lunch, or if it's a break, you just walk in and buy your drinks and buy your snacks and go sit out against the wall. And it felt so normal to us then, why not? This is kind of our country to go enjoy, and a sidewalk was a perfect place to sit down and eat your lunch. But I remember just thinking, what if I was just driving and I rolled up to a gas station to fill up my tank, and I just saw 15 guys kind of sitting out with a bunch of bikes, just eating food and talking, what I would think. And a lot of times that's how we meet people. They'll come by and pretty much just say, what on earth are you doing? Why is there 16 of you in blue shirts sitting outside of this gas station I come to every day? But it's another fun part of the trip, just hanging out. I love just sitting out in front of a gas station. You do it for an hour or 2 hours at a time, and talking and laughing and just having a good time, and just having that complete feeling of being relaxed, and just how a bike trip is a one-of-a-kind thing. There's no other time I can respectably sit outside of a gas station on the ground, but here it's one of the most perfect places to take a nap or have a soda that you could ever imagine. So once again, all the pictures are somewhat representative of a feeling or an idea that goes along with the bike trip. I think this idea is the ridiculous places that you're able to fall asleep on the bike trip. It's a very different tired to feeling to being back home. Being back home, you're kind of sluggish or just don't really feel like doing anything. But on the bike trip, you generally feel pretty upbeat, and I think the exercise really kind of keeps you going and keeps you on top of things and excited, and you never really feel, in the mornings you're pretty bad, but you never really feel just exhausted, tired wise. But if you sit down and you close your eyes for a second, you will be in the deepest sleep you've ever been in, just because it sort of saves all this missed sleep, and all of this exercise just kind of saves it up for you, deep inside. And once you give it an opportunity to come out, it'll come full throttle, and you'll be asleep for 5 hours at a time without even realizing it. So I thought this picture was kind of funny, that went from sitting on a slide to falling asleep on a slide, and how easy it is. I remember when I climbed Washington Pass, we arrived at the top at about 1 o'clock, and I thought before I ate lunch, and I was like, well, I might as well take a quick nap, just kind of I biked all day. There's not much to do up on our campsite, so I went to take a nap, and woke up feeling nice and rested, and got out of my tent and checked my cell phone, and I think it was 5:45, and so a quick 4 hours and 45 minute passed, but it felt great. And it's just kind of another naps on the bike trip is something that you never ever take for granted back at home, but they mean so much to you out there. Thinking about it, it's actually I'd say pretty unfair to call it a bike trip because the majority of the time we're doing this. So if people, I think, get many just ideas of what we do on a bike trip and how it's all biking and how biking is the main theme and how all of our mind is spent on biking and this and that, and but it really has very little to do with biking at all, and a lot more to do with sitting around, talking, playing cards, hanging out, eating, drinking, and not biking. So I think this is a great picture. If you this is what I think of when I think of a bike trip, because it's just so difficult to find a chunk of time where you can sit and completely relax at a restaurant with your friends, and you break out some cards. We play cards all the time, and we would literally sit in restaurants for 3 hours at a time, and you'd go up there and you'd grab lunch, and then you'd wait 30 minutes and grab a dessert, and then wait 30 minutes and maybe grab another burger, and then maybe 30 more minutes, get a couple more sodas, and maybe another dessert, and it's just kind of that chill factor and that just relaxing feel that means so much to me, and I think is what attracts me to the bike trip so much. So my kind of idea, if I had to put a picture out of a bike trip for you, would be this picture. Sort of a difficult picture to understand at first, but this right there, that metal thing, is a bike kickstand, and the stuff around it is the asphalt or the pavement. But we never really got that much heat on this trip, which was insane. We went through the middle of the country, and we just never had it too bad. There was a couple 100-degree days, and I think it got up to 105, 110 a couple times, but every single night it cooled down enough that we were able to sleep, and that's one way that I think we really got gifted on this trip. But it did get hot a couple times, and I think this is good evidence of how hot it can get. You can kind of feel yourself sinking into the asphalt when you bike. It's a weird feeling. You can feel you sort of slow yourself down, and there's actual tracks in the road of where the cars drive and how it's sunk down from the asphalt kind of heating up and melting. And we would set up our bikes with our kickstands and go eat lunch, and we'd come back from lunch and everyone's bikes would just be laying on the ground because the kickstand had sunk into the asphalt and just fallen over. So another good picture or evidence of a different aspect to the bike trip. So funny to say, but when I'm on the bike trip, I actually a lot of time think about how can I bring back any sort of feel of the bike trip to people back home. Like how can I show them what I'm thinking and what I'm seeing? And I think this picture actually shows pretty well the sort of sights and feel of a bike trip. So you just be sitting on your bike, and a lot of times you're biking groups, a lot of times you bike by yourself, and I think this just kind of showed the sort of patience and acceptance you have to have on a bike trip, because I think we turned a corner, and as you can see, as far as you can see, all there is road, and all there are hills, and you go up and you go down and you go up and you go down, and you just kind of, you can't let that get to you. And sometimes it's frustrating being able to see other people far ahead and off in the distance because they're closer to camp than you are. But I think this is sort of the feel of every day when you're biking, and you can see these people in front of you and you can see these people behind you, but just the vast open space, and just it kind of puts it into perspective, like how big this country is and how small we are, and how we're kind of making our way across the country and slowly getting to our destination every single night. But this also shows the sight distance, and a lot of times you wait to see a town off in the distance, and you wait to see a water tower, but it's a little difficult when you can't see a town, and you know you're going to a town that you should be able to see, just because that means for as far as you can see, you need to keep biking. But it's interesting, and it's a feel you definitely have to get used to, and you really learn to kind of not only accept but appreciate, and it's just amazing scenery out there. Even if there's not much going on, just the feel of you being in this huge country is something that you really find cool after you think about it for a while. Sort of on the same topic of the weather, you see some of the craziest weather in the world out there, and I think another thing that is important is you're actually affected by the weather for the first time. I mean, every day your plans depend on what the weather will be. If it's nice outside, maybe you'll walk to class. If it's raining, then you have to get your umbrella. But other than that, not much of your day is affected by the rain. If you're inside, then it affects what you're like, the scenery you're looking at. But that's about it. So if it rains, like, our day is drastically different to if it's sunny, and you kind of for the first time realize how much you are controlled by the weather. And a lot of times we had to try and outrun a storm. As you can kind of see down the road, there's a little blue patch, and to the left there's a much bigger black patch. But a lot of times you sort of see this stuff, and you know what's going to happen, so you just hope you can outrun it or somehow get saved from being poured on. But there was some amazing weather out there, and the mixes of rain and sun, and we saw a lot of rainbows. Rain off in the distance I always thought looks really cool. But just kind of the nature aspect of the trip, and how much you realize that when you're not in a car or in a house, how much you're kind of following weather and following nature, and how it's not exactly as much under your control as you once thought. This is our first day into Montana. It is a small town. I think there was no more than 50 or 60 people that lived there. And we went up to it's called Alzada. We went up to the bar. That was the only place they had food there. And asked them if there was a place to stay, and they let us camp outside. And we camped in a big hayfield. And I don't know what it was about it, but it was just really... it kind of put the American countryside feel all in one campsite, and it was just a beautiful place to hang out. And we would sit on the hay bales and chill all together, and it was just I don't know, there was something about it that it was just a campsite that meant a lot to everyone. And I remember laying in bed looking around and looking at the stars from my tent, and it was just a amazing place. And there was no cell phone service, and there was no gas stations. There was no anything, so it was really just us hanging out, playing cards at this old biker bar, and it really, I think it was a great day for everyone, and it proved that you don't need the most amazing town in the world to be one of the most memorable. It's each town kind of has its own character, and because of that, that's the reason why you remember it. And just because it's bigger, just because it has a pool, just because it has a supermarket, doesn't necessarily make it the most important, most meaningful town on the trip. And we are in Glacier National Park. I think it's difficult from this point on. It's such a thick portion of the trip that it sort of sometimes overshadows everything up to this point, which is difficult because until now we've been on the road for 8 weeks or 7.5 weeks, so much has happened. But once this Glacier National Park is the place to be. It is the town that every single moment, it's like in the back of your head of where you want to make it to. And we have 3 days off here, hanging out at a campsite. We rent a van and tour the park, and it really kind of separates you from the bike trip for a minute and lets you completely refresh. It's not just a day off where your legs are rested but you still feel as tense as before. It's really a time where you completely let everything go and start fresh, and it's like it's a nice new slate for everyone, and it definitely means a lot for morale and just overall exhaustion and rest and that sort of thing. So it's a good time. As you can see, everyone is very close by now. and pretty much out of their mind. But that's how it is, and you don't really care about what's going on outside of the trip at this point. Like, cars will drive by you, and I'm sure they're like, "What on earth are these guys doing?" But we have such good fun together that it really doesn't matter. So this was our couple days in Glacier National Park. On these 3 days, I said we rented a van and drove around the park, and we actually, for some reason, decided to go on hikes and use all the time we should be resting for other physically strenuous activities. But we hiked to the top of a place called Mount Oberlin. It's about 1,000-foot or 1,500-foot climb, and once you get to the top, you can see everything around you, and it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. And with everyone feeling so good about taking the days off, it's just it's almost everyone's like too happy to be there, and everything starts to like sink in what you've been doing and what's going on and how far in the trip you've made it. So we hung out here for a while and ate lunch on the top, and decided to start heading down when we heard some thunder. And I think halfway down the mountain, it started to rain gently, and then it started to rain harder, and then it started to hail. So for the last 20 minutes of our hike, we were kind of running down this mountain in shorts and a t-shirt, and trying to get back to shelter while we were getting pelted by hail. But it sucked a little bit, but it was kind of funny. And it was this kind of thing where, in the end, it's going to be a story and something to laugh about. So it doesn't really matter if there's a couple minutes of discomfort. In 2007, me and Chris Allen got known for always looking for stuff to jump off of. I think it started just with a bridge we rode over one time, and the water looked really nice. And it kind of grew from there. So when people would ask us about the bike trip, a lot of times it would come up in stories. So when we went on this bike trip, a lot of kids went on it knowing that they wanted to do a lot of jumping off of things, which I always thought was kind of funny because when I asked them about why did you want to go on the bike trip, some people would just be like, "Oh, I just wanted to hang out, take lots of good pictures, and jump off of stuff." And that has biking not listed once in there. But so this was in Montana. It's about a 40-foot jump, and I love jumping off stuff, and I'm not usually scared, but this is one that definitely takes you a couple minutes to gather yourself before you do it. And I think they're saying as soon as you commit and you step just far enough off of the top of that rock that you can't go back, then I think suddenly the water drops like another 150 feet, and you get that kind of ooh feeling. But it was a lot of fun. The water was freezing, but it was a lot of fun, and kind of gave you put that smile on your face you can't take off. And I just remember my heart beating wildly, and just true adrenaline rush and excitement. So I absolutely love jumping off stuff for some reason. Everyone always questioned our sanity and made sure that we weren't doing anything stupid, but we would always go to the bottom first and swim and make sure it was deep enough before we jumped off of 40-foot cliffs. But so safety first, of course. As a leader, I made sure that would always happen. But once we make sure it's deep enough, then the safety is up to personal choice. And there were some crashes, of course, and those did not just stop in the first week. I think the first week people a lot of times forget to unclip and they'll fall over then, but just because you're good at biking doesn't mean you can't fall over. So this was at the Idaho state border, and we had finally finished Montana that we had been in for 3 weeks. So it was another kind of Ohio state sign feeling where it was really kind of monumental moment to see this sign, even though going across the border doesn't mean that much. But so as we're heading down, I remember biking down and seeing this gravel, and I was one of the first people, and me and Brian looked at each other and we were like, make sure every single person that goes down this hill we watch, because I guarantee at least one of them is going to bike right into that gravel and fall over. and as long as they weren't going too fast, then it'd be a good lesson learned, and probably no need for us to warn them. So we sat and took pictures at the state sign and kind of watched everyone come down, and just as expected, this is Zach Jansen. He rode down the hill and wasn't really too aware of the depth of the gravel, and rode straight into it before sinking and I think sliding on his face and his chest for a little while. But in the end, he also agreed it was funny, so there was no hurt feelings, just a couple scraped knees and wrists. But another good story to tell after temporary discomfort. Once, because I've been on the bike trip, and it's so hard to think about everything that you have to explain, and because there's so many things I assume that most people don't actually know. So this picture is just a representation of kind of what it looks like us going to sleep every single night. And if you can see in the back right, that's my tent, the kind of small looking one. But this would be a nice night. We try and find a pavilion that has a roof, so if it does rain, we're double protected. Our tents do have rain flies, but it's a lot nicer to be able to leave your stuff underneath a roof and feel that even though you could be protected, you're out of the rain, and you can walk around and hang out at night even if it's raining. So, but there is a lot of people and not usually that much space. So as you can see, we pack pretty tight once we find a space to hang out. But I thought this was just a good picture of what it looks like every night when we roll into a camp. And the next morning we pack up all your tents and you wouldn't even know it, but we're back and moving across the country, and there's almost no kind of leftover and no proof that we ever stayed there. But that was also something that I really liked, the ability to just camp and stay the night somewhere and move on, and all of that stuff fits in your bags. So the kind of flexibility and ease of travel is something that I love, and I love being able to just kind of go around and not really having any borders, such as like not being restricted to where a hotel is and where a car can get you. This is another picture of just kind of some of the stuff we do after biking. This is in a town called Twisp. It's only about 5 or 6 days from the finish, but this is there was a river next to us, and you can't really tell, but further down in the bottom right, the river actually gets running pretty fast. So for a couple hours we tried to see if we could cross the river without being kind of pulled away, and then we decided just to kind of go rafting as a human raft. So we would go up to the top and jump in the water and ride down all the rapids, just floating, and then go back out. But just another picture of the scenery and what we kind of got up to with no TVs to watch and no games to play, just the land that's around you and the people you're with. In Montana, we had a kind of a aspect to this trip that I didn't have in 2007. We went off Adventure Cycling Route is it's a map that has a route laid out that is kind of the best route for bikers, and it has lots of gas stations, it has lots of places to stay, and it's just kind of like the easiest route. But we had done that once, and we wanted to kind of mix it up a little bit, so we decided to make our own route through Montana. And it was amazing because we went to places that no one really goes and are not well known, and it was really a new feel of being secluded, but that did come with the lack of civilization and just kind of long amounts of time without anything. As this sign shows you, between here and something 74 miles away, there is not a single, there's no proof that anyone has ever been there other than the road you're on. And 74 miles for us is a full day. So if we got up right here and biked for 75 miles, then that next gas station we find we'd camp at. So there was a lot of days where you would have to know kind of the night before that you would need food for that whole day, that you would need water for the whole day, just that there's nothing to bail you out when you run out of water or you run out of food. And this was definitely it was a cool sort of responsibility exercise. You really had to plan ahead and control your own, I don't know, your own fate almost. No one would care if I forgot to bring a banana to eat for lunch. That's my problem. So you kind of learn to deal with yourself and get yourself into good standing and make sure you have everything you need. But always look out for everyone else. So it was a really cool part of the trip of kind of being away from these gas stations and away from these big restaurants and really being forced to kind of deal with what the country gave us. So it was hard, but it was also another exciting and characterizing part of the trip. This is another picture to show you the sort of what I see on a bike. And this is in one of the mountains, and the mountain passes are the last, I think, 7 days of the trip, and every day you have one mountain to climb, and it's just a completely different feel than normal days because these mountains are only 15, 18 miles long, but for 15 miles all you're doing is biking uphill. It doesn't stop, it doesn't really get flat. It just goes uphill and uphill and uphill and uphill. And they take a good 2.5, 3 hours to bike because you can only go about 6 miles an hour up them. But this is kind of the view that you look forward to seeing all day. And you can't really tell it's that much, but it's the crescent of the mountain. And that green sign says Wakanda Pass. And they have a green sign at the top of every mountain. And once you finally make that turn and you see those bikes and you see that green sign, it's one of the best feelings in the world because you know you've made it to the top, and all of that day's effort is kind of given to you right there, and you don't have to bike again because you know you're going straight downhill for a long time. And I think that was just one of the feelings that is just irreplaceable and just is definitely a memorable one on the trip. And it's easy just to show you the sign, but without the kind of the build up to it, you don't get the same sort of feeling. So the first time your kind of eyes catch that glimpse of a green sign, it's a good feeling. So the final mountain, the final pass is called Washington Pass, and it's one of the biggest mountains. And you've been biking up mountains for 4 days straight, so it's really the end of the road. This is 2 days before we finish our trip, and it's almost the climax of the whole trip. You know what you have to do. It's a 17-mile climb. Your legs are tired already, but just the fact that you know that once you get to the top of this mountain, you're almost there. You're 2 days away. You've done so much, and it's just kind of a lot to take in. So this is one of the final stretches. It's the final turn around the mountain. And me doing this before, I remember I actually got to this point and had to get off my bike in 2007 and just lay against the guardrail because I was so tired. And I really had to give it everything I had. This time we were a lot stronger from biking through Montana. We had to do a lot of practice mountains sort of as we were biking through Montana. So we were a lot stronger this time, but it's still a fight to get to the top, and it's something that you've been thinking about for months almost. You sit and think on the bike all day, so thinking that the place that you've kind of idealized in your head and you've imagined and created what it looks like is about to come real. And I think that's a very it's I don't know, it's almost too much to take in at one moment. And this is the top. If you can see that that kind of road curls around, and that's a zoomed in picture of or this is a zoomed out picture of the last one, but this is pretty much the top. And I biked up here with 4 other guys, and I remember getting to the top and getting off my bike, and it was just the sort of feeling where you feel like you've won something, or just all that achievement kind of came rushing in at once. And I think the best part for me was that it wasn't just me feeling this, but I could look around and see all of these guys who were in the exact same position, and no one really had to say anything. You could just see everyone's like couldn't smile big enough, and you just felt absolutely amazing. And we would look around and just kind of catch our breath and just kind of think about how much has gone into this trip, how much it's meant to you, how much you've changed from when you started, and it's just a great place to kind of look back at what's happened. And there's nothing you can show to recreate it. It's just one of a kind, and I remember standing there and saying, I wish I could kind of keep this feeling forever, just because there's nothing like it. But it was amazing, and I think this time having the responsibility of a leader just gave me that much more and that much greater of a feeling of achievement, because I didn't just feel I didn't feel like it was all just for me. Like I feel the accomplishment of 10 other guys, sort of helping them get there, but being able to see them there for themselves and how much it meant to them. So at our last town, Concrete, it's the realization that this is the last time you're ever going to tent on the bike trip, and this is the last night you're going to spend together. And somehow the town of Concrete just never fails to give you an exciting last night. In 2007, we saw a bar fight, which was very interesting and highly enjoyable to watch. So there was a lot of build-up. What was Concrete going to bring this year? And I don't know, like, you feel like it has to be amazing, otherwise you're not finishing the trip right. So we rolled into our last supper, and we all sat around our table and ordered our food and kind of talked about what the trip had done for us and how fun it was and how good of a time we've had. And a couple little kids started singing karaoke, and at first we were like, this is going to be annoying. We're going to try and eat dinner and hang out and have to listen to a couple like 12-year-old kids sing karaoke. But of course it just takes one person to get everyone moving. So one person decided that they were going to do some karaoke, and once one person did it, then someone else did it, and before you know it, you had 4 of our guys from the bike trip singing the Spice Girls. I don't actually think they picked this song. I think someone decided to sign them up for it. But it was the kind of ending that we needed, and it was one of the most funny things I've ever seen. But we just kind of hung out, sung karaoke, and enjoyed the last real night we all had together. So this is on our last day of biking off to the coast, and I love this picture just because it shows a little bit more about what goes on while you're biking. And if you can't tell, I think he is playing the drums. There's another picture of him playing guitar, another picture of him singing, and also I think getting some piano in. But you get in such like great zones when you're biking, and if the right song comes on, you just feel like you can bike anywhere or do anything. So I was biking next to him, and I would look over, and he would just be going nuts playing a drum solo or a solo on the guitar. So I thought it was quite funny, and just a really good representation of kind of what we do every day, and maybe get a little too confident with our biking abilities and our control of the handlebars without hands. But it was a fun time, and it just kind of shows what goes on for all those miles. You kind of can't, it's impossible to not get a little too comfortable when you bike for 7 hours every single day. So this is what really happens. So just like on July 22nd for Brian's birthday, we messed with him. On August 18th, I kind of knew I had something coming, and I wasn't really worried about it. I knew it was going to be something funny. So I woke up and was slow to get out of my tent just because I was waiting for someone to do something. And as I expected, 2 people came up, running up to me, ready to pour water on me. But knowing a little better as a leader, as being experienced with some pranks, I was kind of ready for this. So I managed to get out of the way before I was dunked with a couple of bottles of water. However, I didn't really have any. I couldn't really save myself from this one, so I walked outside and found my everything that was in my bike spread across the basketball court. And then I went and saw the frame of my bike, which is in the very front of the picture, about 300 yards away in a tree on the other side of the camp we were staying at. So when everyone else ate breakfast and packed up their stuff, I put my bike back together and put everything back in my bike, or my bike bags. But it was good. I appreciated it, even though it wasn't the most enjoyable thing in the world. It was funny, and it was kind of a good end to the trip, showing that even though it might be our last day, doesn't mean you're not going to get away with having a birthday. So it was a great birthday. It was almost too much arriving and having my birthday on the same day, but it was a fantastic time, and I mean, I couldn't have asked for any better of a birthday present than arriving at the West Coast with 15 best friends. And the final picture, something that you've really been imagining for the entire trip, what the sign's going to look like and what you're going to feel, and just kind of all the emotions and memories that are going to kind of meet and come together when you arrive at Anacortes. And this isn't the actual beach, but it's a sign about 2 miles out, and we always stop and hang out at the sign and take pictures and just kind of let it sink in before you arrive and see your parents. And I think it just kind of shows how tight of a group we were, and just the fact that this is the last time that all of us are going to be together like we were, and just kind of the group connection that you've done something that no one else will ever be able to understand. It was one of the best groups I've ever been with. You couldn't pick a group that would function better together than this one, just because everyone was so different. They just fit really well together, and everyone was great friends, and there was so many good jokes and so many good stories that are just waiting to be told and waiting to be asked about. So that was the conclusion of Cycle 2010. We raised $2,200 $22,000, sorry, for UNC Lineberger, which was a huge success. And it was just everything I could have asked for. And I'm sure stories will keep coming out, and even today it still takes time to think about and really realize what's happened, just because life always seems to move so fast. But I don't regret a single thing about it, and I'm so glad I was able to go on it. And it just was the second trip of a lifetime, with a new group of guys that I'm best friends with, and I'll be able to connect with forever.